That is why gas prices above $4 matter so much symbolically. It is a threshold people remember. It feels like a return to a period they associate with stress, inflation, and reduced flexibility. It may not mean recession by itself, it may not mean households suddenly stop functioning, but it does mean the economy loses some margin for error. If consumers were already stretched, a fuel shock makes them more fragile. If inflation looked like it might calm down, a fuel shock makes that story less comfortable. If markets were hoping for easier monetary policy, a fuel shock complicates that too. Economists also worry because fuel prices tend to rise fast and fall slowly. The shock is immediate, but the relief often takes longer. Even if oil stabilizes, the process of fully easing back through gas stations, freight systems, and household psychology is not always quick. That means a short geopolitical shock can leave a longer economic bruise than people expect. And if the conflict or supply disruption lasts, the bruise can deepen into something more serious. None of this means gas prices alone control the economy. They do not. But they are one of those variables that can expose weakness very quickly. They reveal how resilient consumers really are, how much inflation pressure still lingers, and how dependent the broader economy remains on energy stability. That is why economists start paying closer attention when gasoline crosses a line like $4 a gallon again. They know it's not just about driving. It's about whether consumers still have enough room left to absorb another shock. In the end, gas prices are suddenly scaring economists again because they combine three dangerous things at once. They are immediate, they are visible, and they spread. They hit consumers directly, they threaten retail spending indirectly, and they complicate the inflation outlook on top of everything else. And once that happens, the question is no longer just why gas got more expensive. The question becomes what else the economy loses when filling up the tank starts taking too much out of everything else. Gas prices are suddenly scaring economists again because they do something very few numbers can do. They hit people fast, they hit them visibly, and they hit them right where everyday life already feels expensive. When the national average moves above $4 a gallon again, this is not just a fuel story, it is a consumer story, an inflation story, and a confidence story all at once, and that is why economists pay attention. They know that when gas jumps this quickly, it doesn't stay at the pump. It spreads through household budgets, business costs, inflation expectations, and eventually the broader economy. In early April 2026, U.S. gasoline prices moved above $4 a gallon after a sharp oil shock tied to conflict involving Iran and disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, and analysts immediately began warning that the hit could pressure consumer spending and worsen the inflation outlook. At first glance, that may sound exaggerated. Gas is just one category in a giant economy. People buy food, pay rent, shop online, make car payments, and cover dozens of other expenses every month. So why do economists get nervous when one number at the gas station moves sharply higher? Because gasoline is one of the few prices consumers see constantly. Most people do not check bond yields on their drive home. They do not track wholesale electricity markets or freight contracts, but they do see the gas station sign, and they understand immediately when it gets worse. That makes gasoline psychologically powerful in a way many other prices are not. It affects expectations just as much as budgets, and that combination matters. The second reason is that gas prices behave like a tax nobody voted for. When fuel prices jump, households cannot easily avoid the cost, especially in a country where millions of people rely on cars for work, school, errands, and daily life. Maybe a family cuts back on dining out. Maybe they delay buying clothes. Maybe they skip a weekend trip. Maybe they put less into savings. Whatever the adjustment is, the money usually comes from somewhere else, and that is exactly why economists worry. A sudden rise in gasoline prices does not create new spending, it redirects spending away from other parts of the economy. This is where the story gets more serious. If gas goes high enough, it starts squeezing the same consumers who are already carrying a lot of pressure.
Rent is still expensive, insurance is expensive, borrowing is expensive. Grocery bills do not feel light, so when gas adds another layer of cost on top of that, it can hit confidence quickly. Households may not stop spending all at once, but they become more cautious, and when enough people get more cautious at the same time, retailers, service businesses, and travel-related sectors start to feel it. What makes this round of gas price fear especially important is the speed and cause of the increase. This was not a slow seasonal rise that people could shrug off as summer blending or regional refinery noise. This was tied to a broader oil shock, and that matters. When oil prices surge because of war risk and threats to major shipping routes, economists know the issue is not just what gas costs today, the issue is how long the pressure lasts, how much it spreads, and what expectations it creates about inflation and growth. Reuters reported that U.S. crude surged above $110 per barrel, and average retail gasoline moved above $4 a gallon, with forecasters warning prices could rise further if disruption persists. And once oil jumps, gas is only the first visible layer. Higher fuel costs also hit trucking, shipping, delivery networks, and freight-intensive goods. Diesel becomes a huge problem too, because diesel quietly moves a big part of the economy. It powers trucks, freight systems, industrial activity, and supply chains. So even if consumers first notice gasoline, businesses are watching the broader fuel complex. If those costs keep rising, some of that pressure can get passed through into goods prices more generally. That's one reason economists get nervous about inflation all over again. Not because one gas price move instantly rewrites the whole economy, but because energy shocks can leak into many other categories if they persist. This is also why one war can change your grocery bill. That may sound dramatic, but it's actually a pretty straightforward chain. Conflict pushes up oil prices. Higher oil prices push up fuel costs. Higher fuel costs make transportation and logistics more expensive. Food has to be grown, processed, packaged, refrigerated, and moved. If those costs rise enough, the final shelf price can rise too. The same logic applies to household goods, deliveries, travel, and many other categories. So even if the original shock comes from far away, the price effects can show up in very local places. Economists worry because consumers do not experience inflation in neat categories. They experience it as a cumulative loss of breathing room. Then there's the retail spending problem. Consumer spending has been one of the most important supports for the U.S. economy, and economists know that energy spikes can hit it fast. If drivers suddenly have to spend much more just to keep moving, some of that money gets pulled out of discretionary spending. Retailers especially worry about lower-income and middle-income households because fuel takes a bigger share of their budget and leaves less room for optional purchases. Recent reporting has highlighted that prices above $4 a gallon are already pressuring sentiment and threatening the spending outlook that many investors were counting on. That's where the economist fear becomes broader than a fuel story. If consumers pull back, growth can soften. But if gas prices stay high, inflation can also stay hotter than hoped, and that combination is nasty because it squeezes the economy from both directions at once. Households spend less freely, but prices still feel uncomfortable. Businesses get weaker demand, but input costs remain pressured. Central banks then face a more awkward environment because they can't respond to slower growth as easily if inflation risks are also rising. In other words, high gas prices can make the whole policy picture more difficult, not just the consumer picture. There is also a confidence issue that matters almost as much as the actual spending data. People don't need to drastically cut back all at once for economists to get worried. Sometimes the warning comes earlier, when households begin to feel more pessimistic about where things are headed. If drivers think gas could keep rising, they don't wait for the full damage to show up before becoming cautious. They start adapting early. They make smaller purchases. They avoid bigger commitments. They become more sensitive to every other price in their life. And once that mood spreads, economic momentum can weaken even before the official numbers fully catch up.